classrooms, what's happening.
Sorry about that.
That's all right, April. We're glad to just jump right in. Today's meeting, we have quite a bit of new information to share with you. And at the end, I'll talk a little bit about the future of these meetings. We're going to change the format for the fall. So just a little cliffhanger towards the end. Much of what we have is new information. And it's a bit of a variety today. So look forward to sharing that with you. Really just one thing to go back over for our recall section. Just as we start our meeting today, I know it's such a busy time of year, so I'm really appreciative of your time today. I hope you get a lot out of this meeting and get a few ideas to hopefully take back and implement with your teams. And I also hope that you're able to take a little bit of time as we continue to get towards the beginning of the school year, just to center yourself, find that balance, that pace that we're going to have to keep. I know at the beginning of July, for me, it felt like, oh, hey, maybe things will get a little quieter, and that ended, long about July 5th. And I know we've been in the thick of it. You have too. I was a little concerned when I was talking to some special ed directors this summer who told me that they didn't take any time off this summer. And so just, please take care of yourselves. We need you. We thought it was going to be a marathon. Turns out it's an ultra marathon, and actually it's an ultra marathon. So got to find our pace, got to be able to keep our stride going and keep our powder dry, as we say, to be able to just do this work and show that leadership that's so necessary. So again, thank you for all your hard work to get the new school year started. So with regard to our recall section, I just want to go back over with you what is already in regulation, but is sometimes practiced a little bit differently across the state about our approved public day programs. So in our regs, which is just quoted up here at the top of my slide, the reg talks about that the students who are in an approved public special education school need to be primarily students with disabilities. And a practice in the state for quite a long time has been that the students in approved public day programs have to exclusively be students with disabilities. The regulation is pretty clear that it says primarily, not exclusively. And we take primarily to mean more than 50%. And so in our reviews through our tiered focus monitoring process, we're just seeing different practices in the state. So we just want to clarify this for you today. If you're running a program, and there's always kind of a fine line between what's an alternative program and what's a day school program. But if you are running, let's just give the example of an alternative school, and it's actually serving more than 50% students with disabilities, we would expect you to apply for that program to actually turn into a day school, not just to be an alternative school once you cross that 50% threshold. So just want to make sure that we put on this slide the information for you. I won't review it. Please use this slide as a resource afterwards about what you need to do to apply to send in that Form 3 and the paperwork to get approval. And then, of course, really appreciate the work that Jean does as our contact person on this with any questions that you might have. So we included her email address there at the bottom. As always, I'll welcome your comments, your questions about any of this. And we'll make sure that we get you what you need going forward. I got a little note from my team just now to step closer to the mic and raise my first grade teacher voice. So I will do that right now and keep the conversation going and hopefully just a little louder. So thank you. So some new information for you. Wanted to just start by making sure that you've seen the different pieces of guidance and FAQs that have come out from the department to get us ready for the new school year. And in particular, the guidance that we put out yesterday about the mask requirement. I'm sure you all know that our board voted this week to require masks in schools until at least October 1st. And so I'm just going to toggle over. We did release a document yesterday about implementing the mask requirement. And then I just highlighted this part down here in yellow about particularly germane to all of you about those individuals who might not be able to wear a mask for medical or behavioral reasons, just reminding you that they are exempted. And so as was the case last year, you've dealt with this last year. We wanted to make sure that that same thinking about exemptions applied this year as well. But I hope that you'll take a look at this. We did email it out yesterday to superintendents, charter school leaders, executive directors. But if you haven't had a chance to see it, I wanted to make sure that you knew that it's in in our PowerPoint for you to be able to access. Also, just we're getting a lot of questions about different scenarios as you start the new school year. What happens if? What should I do when? Those are all great questions. A lot of what you need is in our protocols document. And so just encouraging you, put that link in there around, if you have close contacts, what should happen with close contacts? How do you invoke the test and stay program? Who needs to be quarantined? All of those types of questions are answered in our protocols document. And so please take a look there. We also have released a couple of FAQs. One most recently that clarifies things about, for example, medical waiting rooms, who to contact for air purifiers. So that's in the August 20th FAQ update that I've linked there. And then finally, because it's near and dear to my heart, work that I help to oversee here around all of our COVID testing options that we have for schools this year. Earlier this week, we put out a very extensive FAQ about trying to answer the questions that have come up in the webinars that we've run just these last couple of weeks about COVID-19 testing in schools. And a lot of those questions are coming to me in email, coming to my colleagues. We're glad to have them, but just know that there is a resource that you can turn to where you can get a lot of that information. So if you're wondering about, working with our vendor, obtaining parental consent, questions about those types of issues are in that FAQ, and just encouraging you to take a look there. I hope you get what you need. We are likely to have another webinar next week. We'll be announcing that pretty soon to go back over both the testing program that we have, as well as the protocols, and just again, providing you updated information as more strategies, more good practices come to light to make your work hopefully as efficient and straightforward as possible. I'm going to turn now to information about our an important piece of guidance that we released earlier this summer. This is an update to guidance that we released in January. So the document is called Promoting Student Engagement, Learning, Participation, and Well-Being. The link is on the page that I'm sharing with you right now. And the real gist of this that I want you all to be thinking about with me right now is that this document really focuses on the fact that, we've had a lot of isolation, a lot of separation in this past year. We're going to be welcoming our students back into school, but it's not sort of like pick up right where we left off. We need to work to reestablish connections with families and with students, and how important those connections are to make sure that we, really have, good two-way communication going. And then, at the end of the document, it talks about when there are concerns about child well-being in particular and child safety, what to kind of look for if you need to file a 51A, and how to file a 51A is also included in this document. I want to sort of really make sure that we're all clear, though, that it's very top heavy towards establishing those trusting relationships with families and with students, and thinking through, what we might see in the way of changes in behavior as our students reenter our schools, and kind of adjusting and adapting for those students, for our families, and making sure those systems are in place. And then at the same time, if we need to, knowing when and if we need to be in touch with DCF about questions of abuse or neglect. So I'm just going to go through a few slides about the guidance document itself. We are going to be issuing a PowerPoint that we hope will be fairly turnkey for you, so that you could, principals, special ed leaders, whoever it might be, to share this information with faculty here, at some point at the beginning of the new school year, if it's the right thing to do, if it's a message that you want to reinforce with your staff. We want to give you a PowerPoint that will help you with that. Today, I'm going to show you, the slides I'm showing you today are not that PowerPoint, but a lot of this information will cross over and probably look familiar when you see it. So, just really quickly, this slide on slide 12 here just tells you a little bit more about what's in the document. And like I said, it really focuses on both family engagement and re-envisioning school culture. Sorry, I'm just going back one slide real quick. Just bear with me. I got a little off track there since I'm not in presentation mode. Want to just impress upon you quickly that particularly the family connection section focuses a lot on resources that you could share with your teams. So if you're not already familiar with the Family Resource Centers, with Mass 211, with handholdmass.org, and Mass Support, I felt like this slide was important because these are tools that you could perhaps begin to use now, or make sure that your social workers have now, your counselors, to be ready for the start of the new school year, and getting families to resources, which will be so important as we go forward. So also just thinking about, with that eye on resources, thinking about that relationship building with students and with families. An emphasis on relationship mapping is included in the document. Thinking about positive behavior, you've heard me say before as special ed leaders that, we need to be kind of out in front of conversations about, how do we support principals with more positive and proactive strategies in response to student behavior, as opposed to waiting for things like suspension to be on the table, waiting for school exclusion to be on the table. We need to be starting those conversations as early as we can to get those positive practices in place, and to avoid the more punitive approaches that are sometimes just that feel like the only option. There need to be more options. We need to have a greater array. And so, again, I'm not going to read these slides to you, but really thinking about, how are we approaching student behavior? What are the values? What are the norms that we're going to bring to that? And sorry, one thing that I just wanted to point out to you really quickly, I do apologize, I'm not handling this well, this different format. But yeah, sorry, that's it that I have there. Thanks for bearing with me. Then, like I said, the document does get into when to file a 51A, has some good links about responsibilities as mandated reporters. I know that a lot of you are holding these trainings now for your staff, that required annual training. There might be some good resources here for you to draw out. And a really important thing about that we've included in this document is just making sure that you as district leaders are also stepping back, asking your school leaders to step back to look at, outside of like an individual concern that might present itself, because if there's an individual concern of abuse or neglect, you need to file. But let's look at trends. Let's look at patterns. Do we have those communication systems in place? Are we working with our families in a two-way conversation format? Are we getting those translators in place so that we're really breaking through any language barriers? Because we really want to make sure that where might bias be playing into some decisions about filing 51As? Are we using sometimes 51As when we don't have those strong connections with families? And so we do want you to sort of have some additional considerations about just making sure you've covered all your bases outside of that individual who might present that immediate concern, but just like so that we cut down on maybe in any inappropriate referrals as well as we go forward. So we have information about, again, filing those 51As, what might warrant a 51A, and how to do it as well. And then finally, bear with me, I'm almost done with this section. We also included in it information that you need to know about students who might be in a remote learning environment. And again, this is relevant to you because some students with medical conditions might be prevented from coming into school during this upcoming school year. And we have clarified for you, if you recall earlier, back in June, we said that there might be situations where those students could be participating remotely through virtual connections to the classroom, live streaming, for example. And so if that happens, if you have students who are learning remotely during this upcoming school year, we wanted to make sure that we went back over important things, important considerations about, participation, about attendance for those students who are learning remotely. So just encouraging you to take a look at the document, again, from whichever perspective you need to come at this. Are you, thinking about messages to share with your staff about positive approaches to welcoming students and families back into our schools, needing to know some helpful information about the 51A process, and then a real focus on what to know about remote learning. Again, just want to make sure that you're aware that's what's in this document, and just encouraging you to take a look at it when you get a chance. So hope that's helpful, and glad to take any questions as always. at the end of the presentation. It was a busy week for our colleagues at the federal level between both OSERS and OSEP. We got 2 important documents, and I'm really actually excited about what's in these documents. I think they really help to clarify some important information for us. And so the first one is just an overall letter from OSERS and OSEP talking about what they're calling their return to school roadmap. And what basically the letter outlines is that as we are starting this new school year and thinking about the effects of the pandemic, that we are making sure that we are providing all components of FAPE and special education to our students. That's very familiar to us in Massachusetts. Just glad to have that reconfirmed. But really what this does is sort of put a stake in the ground to say OSERS and OSEP are going to be providing us with more guidance about this as we begin the new school year. And then they subsequently just released their first guidance document, which is really helpful. It's about Child Find. It's in a Q&A format. I'm going to show it to you in just a second. I would strongly encourage you to take a look at it. It's an easy read, easily digestible, and I think you'll find it helpful for a lot of the questions that you have about the Child Find process, about the evaluation process, about referral. And I'm actually just going to go ahead and show it to you right now and call out a couple of things that I found particularly useful about it. So this is the document just released on August 24th. And again, you can see, in this Q&A style, just under the first section, general Child Find requirements, we come to a few important questions I just want to call out to you. Who's obligated to conduct Child Find for students in charter schools? Helpful to say that yes, charter schools are responsible for this. Again, I don't think that's new information, but hopefully just confirming. As we go a little bit deeper, the document acknowledges that there might be more parents who've turned to homeschooling as a result of the pandemic. And I thought this was really helpful, that it identifies that districts are responsible, LEAs are responsible for providing Child Find to students who are homeschooled. It's a little bit of an eye-opener for me to think about that a little bit more deeply. And so just encouraging you to take a look here about both the components of students who are in private schools and students who are homeschooled. You've always known that you've got this requirement, particularly for private school students. I like some of the ideas that are in this document, particularly when it comes to private school students and Child Find. It talks about how in consultation meetings, that during consultation meetings, it can be a great opportunity to discuss Child Find, to talk about the Child Find process, getting ideas from participants in the consultation meetings about ways to engage and educate stakeholder groups about what is involved in locating, identifying, and evaluating children suspected of having disabilities. Thought that was a great tip. Really glad to see it here, and I hope you find that helpful. The other part, I'm not going to go through it in a lot more detail. I found this question A5 very helpful about examples of Child Find activities, because I know, at least in my case, I kind of had Child Find was like a machine. We just sort of did the same thing every year. And what I really take away, the spirit of this document to me, is OSEP and OSERS saying to us, hey, life has changed. The pandemic has really affected us, and we need to rethink our Child Find activities. We need to really make sure we're finding out, kids maybe that we've not had the same connections with in the past. We didn't really see them as much last year as we did in the past. We need to kind of double down and reach out a little further than we maybe have in the past to conduct these Child Find activities. So, I like, a lot of what we are familiar with in terms of sending information out in multiple languages to, parents, families, daycare, child providers, like confirming we do that, right? One of my favorite things in the whole document is this idea of kindergarten roundups. I'm from Montana, I was raised in Colorado. A roundup usually involves cattle in my background. And so, this idea of kindergarten roundup, I'm really glad that they put in the IE here, because then I was like, oh, I get it. I know. Kindergarten orientation, that's what they mean. That's what we call it in Massachusetts. But, what really stood out to me was thinking about older students, being involved in more screening activities, particularly if they're in private schools. How can we screen private school students or homeschooled students? I know that, when I was in the district, we had screening for our preschool kids, but we weren't really routinely screening older students who maybe attended private schools or homeschooled. We didn't really make that as part of the announcement necessarily. And so just encouraging you to take a look at these ideas that might be a step beyond what we've historically done relative to child find, because I think that they share some good ideas. I don't have a lot more highlighted for you. I did want to point out that there are some things that I find helpful in here about who can refer a child, as well as do you have to conduct the initial evaluation if the parent makes a formal request. I know in my work with my evaluation team leaders in the past, we often had this question: do we have to follow up on this referral? And you know what? I really want us to take the spirit of like, yeah, we usually do, right? It's very rare that we wouldn't. But it is helpful to clarify here that if the LEA does not suspect that the child has a disability, it can deny the request. But hey, there are really important steps that you need to take to make sure that parents' due process rights are protected if you take that stance. And so again, it's a detail that I think is important just to make sure that you see it in writing here, something you could share with your teams to make sure they're seeing this as well and how it's written too. So that's basically what I wanted to cover from this document. Again, would just encourage you to read it and look into it a little bit further. But I think it's helpful and I'm glad we have it. And there is more to come. OSEP and OSERS are telling us that we will be getting more from them on different aspects of special education in the coming months. That kind of relates to, there is a question at the end of this document that relates to students who may be experiencing long COVID. So the symptoms that have persisted relative to being diagnosed with COVID. And it talks about if there is a student with long COVID, they probably should be evaluated to determine whether or not they need special education services. That is also confirmed in a fact sheet that OSEP put out a little earlier this summer. So I just included a link here. And when thinking about this, it really raised for me, again, the question that I know we've talked about a lot in these meetings, but I just want to go back over with you one more time, that students who have medical conditions that require them, that prohibit them from being in school, can have access to home and hospital services as they have in the past, but there might be more of a demand for it now, more of a need for it now based on students who can't get vaccinated and who are immunocompromised or have other medical conditions that would prohibit them from being in school. So just a reminder that we have updated our Q&A guide and we shared it with you back in June, and we're making sure that it is correct on our website as well. But it talks about the idea that students may need these services that can include remote learning and live streaming. And I've had a lot of questions about this recently as we get closer to the start of the school year. People really, holding fast to like all kids need to be in school. We need in-person learning. I agree with you. And there are some students though who won't be able to come into the school building. And for those students, I'm talking to special ed directors who are coming up with really creative solutions, providing some in-home services. So having teachers or related service providers go into the home and combine that maybe with some hybrid, some streaming, some virtual as well. I'm hearing about a lot of good creative ideas. I just want to encourage that, to say all of that is on the table for this unique and small group of students who will need this type of creative thinking. I also want to point out to you, again, this hasn't changed. This is what we shared with you at the very end of the school year, that this slide mentions siblings, that if you have the sibling of a student who is unable to come into school for a medical condition, the district can decide what they need to do for the family unit and how to approach learning for the siblings, which means you could decide that the sibling too should participate in some form of remote learning. We're leaving that to you to work out, because we think the family situation, the dynamic better than the state would. And so again, that guidance hasn't changed, and would just encourage you to continue to lean in on that. And I know there are a lot of questions about this. I say this at the end of every section, so I won't be a broken record. You know what to do if you have questions. You know where the chat is. I'm going to go on to the next topic. We have, as we have done for, at the end of 2020, the beginning of the 2021 school year, and now at the beginning of the 2022 school year, we have developed a letter that again sort of reiterates the message from OSEP and OSERS about, that we will continue to provide FAPE. And there is a component of the letter that talks about if compensatory services meetings weren't held, they still will be. And so just reminding you of that. We did have a chance to, of course, vet this letter across special ed directors and attorneys and advocates, just so that there's a 360 view on it. And so we will be posting it soon, so that, and as we did in the past, we hope that you'll just pass that along to families as part of your communications. Obviously, you don't have to own it. You can say it's DESE's letter to families. But we would appreciate you helping to get that out. We will share with you the link to use that will include, actually this is the link, but we'll let you know when the translations are there, so that it is accessible for families. We're also providing an FAQ that will again, sort of make family friendly the concepts that we've been sharing with you most recently about the start of the new school year and where it will be posted. So those are some of the key updates that are and documents that are coming from our office. The next one, though, I'm really excited about is really our first public facing document about the IEP Improvement Project. And it's really replacing what we had called ICERS in the past, is Special Education the Right Service, with referral, evaluation, and eligibility guidance. I always felt like ICERS didn't really explain what the document was. And we're moving now to providing information for you through a guidance that just focuses on referral, evaluation, and eligibility. Where we are with this is that, if you recall, many of you participated in this. We worked with EDCO last year to have an extensive stakeholder process with both non-school-based stakeholders and school-based stakeholders. And there were 16 meetings reviewing our 70 pages of document that related to REE, and over 225 stakeholders. So robust feedback last year. It concluded at the end of the school year. We spent the summer redrafting and getting ready for you to release this now. And so really excited about bringing this to you. And one of the key, I'd mentioned that when we took ICERS and turned it into this REE guidance, and it was lengthy. It was your feedback to us was, it is really dense. It's going to be hard to navigate through this. What can you please reduce the density, the complexity of this document. And so we very much did, and I'm going to show you in a second what it looks like and how we've tried to kind of organize the information so that it will be clearer and more accessible in a digital format primarily. We will certainly make a full guidance document available, but we hope that you'll interact with this guidance in our digital format. And ultimately, this is what we will be releasing. We're only releasing a portion of this right now. But what you will be looking at again, in a digital format, an interactive digital format, is a document that will start with, no surprise, introduction, really defining what is special education, thinking about the core legal requirements and timelines. And then for each section, remember, referral, evaluation, and eligibility, we have broken it down into the guidance, ideas for system level directors, practitioners, and then additional resources, so that you can just get to what you need more immediately without having to kind of slog through a very lengthy guidance document. So what we're sharing with you today is the sections that I have here with the green arrows. And without any further ado, I'm going to turn over to that right now. That's why I'm in this mode, so that you can see this is what it looks like. This is that digital format that I was telling you about. And as you scroll through it, you can just see that
they brought the big
the
guns in to
information
say
is
no.
going to be pretty easy to to digest, because it's in kind of segments that should be easy to follow. And again, you can, with using our kind of interactive feature, you can get right to what you need. So wherever you need to go, you can get right there. And, again, hopefully it's just something that you'll be able to kind of, again, share with your team, read and digest with your team, and, get the information that you need in a really kind of easy, hopefully user-friendly way. And then, you gave us a lot of feedback about the graphics we were using. And so we've changed it so that they hopefully look and are easier to just sort of at a glance, sort of understand and follow. So I hope that as you're seeing this, it's not raising your blood pressure. Hopefully it's like, all right, short sections that get right to the heart of the matter. There's nothing in here. What we're really attempting to do here is just to explain legal requirements. There's not a lot of extra exposition, if you will, not a lot of additional expository language, just really getting right to the heart of the matter. So we will be releasing this for you soon. I don't have the link available today, but after this meeting, there are a few things we need to share with you as follow-up. Keep in mind that the OSER's OSEP document that just came out this week greatly influences what we have here. Like, there are some things that they clarified in that guidance document that we want to make sure we're very sharp on here. So we're just making sure we put the finishing touches on pulling all of that together, and we'll be getting you the link to this in very short order so that you can begin to use it. So after that, we're going to follow up with some, we're going to build out this resource further with the evaluation and eligibility guidance, because remember, right now what we're sharing with you when we send you the link will be the referral section. So more information to come on evaluation and eligibility. And then, kind of the optional sections to look at would be these kind of tips and ideas, hopefully to bring these ideas to life. Like when you look at that Q&A from OSEP, there are tips and ideas built right into that document. We're just going to sort of section ours out separately so that if you want tips, you can go to them. Some of those same ideas that you're going to see in the OSEP document, we're certainly going to pull over here, as well as our glossary of terms. We're going to continue to update the document as necessary, as well as we will produce it in a PDF. If you don't want to read it in our digitized format, you would be able to download a PDF and just go through it, in a paper form as well. So we'll look forward to your feedback. We'll be sending you the link so that you can dive into it. And again, we hope that it's just a way of, a lot of this information, but it could be a good place if you're hiring a new ETL or working with your school psychologist, or just need to remind yourself of timelines and whatnot, that we just want you to have a go-to place that replacing the old information. We're taking out ICERs and replacing it with this as we go forward, as a really important first step towards moving along with the IEP Improvement Project. All right, just about my last topic for today is our upcoming training sessions for MCAS Alt, and really glad that Deborah Hand is with us here today for any questions that might come up at the end as well. But when we do our fall trainings, just want to put in a plug for you to consider attending, particularly the virtual administrator overview. I always found those, they weren't virtual back in the day when I went, but I always found it to be helpful. I find that there are a lot of things that come up in those meetings, even though they're about MCAS Alt, that also help me understand some of any changes to MCAS as a whole. So again, just encouraging you to participate, and the registration flyer link is here, as well as how to contact Deborah, who's always available and ready to help. And just a reminder about the topics that we're going to include. I think, really important that we continue to look at that 1% cap and the participation guidelines. So there are the dates, and we're also having some sessions about the competency and grade level portfolio sessions. So in addition to the other training sessions that I mentioned, we have sessions that are devoted to the competency and grade level portfolio. So those dates are included here. and an overall introduction to MCAS Alt. So this might be something that, if you have new members of your team that need to sort of get that core understanding of MCAS Alt, here are ways that they can begin to get that information. And you can see how we've broken it out between core concepts, ELA and writing, science, technology, engineering. So again, hope that you're able to pass this information along to your teams. Maybe you've already seen it as we're putting out information, but just want to reiterate it here. And so just if you have questions about MCAS Alt, I know Deborah's here on hand, and so we'll just be glad to do anything we can to support you at the end of today's meeting. All right, you may have seen recently that we put out, we haven't issued one of these in a while, but we put out our special education updates. And this is the topic. These are the topics that we included in our updates that we sent out earlier this month. These in the past, there was more kind of an article format, a welcome letter from me. We know you're busy, and so we went right to kind of more of the heart of the matter, just to kind of give you updates on key things that a lot of them maybe we cover here, but we're all different types of learners, right? And so there are topics that we've covered in these meetings, also some additional topics that we would appreciate, if you could take a look at, particularly related, things like the SBP APR. The link here, when you get the PowerPoint that says contents this month, that's the link to the sign up form. If you're not already signed up to get special education updates and you're saying, what the heck is Russell talking about? Click on that link, sign up. Anybody can do it. To get our special education updates emailed to them directly. We did work with our existing list of special education directors that we draw from directory administration to send this out. And so you should have received it automatically if you're listed as a special education administrator in directory assistance. But if you didn't and you want to make sure you get it in the future, just click on that link to sign up. We also have just sent out to you, when we invited you to this meeting, a survey that really helps us think more about the meeting topics for this upcoming school year. So this is kind of a segue into what I'm going to tell you about the change in format that we intend to use for these upcoming meetings. And so we want to get your feedback, though. We want to make sure these meetings are timely and relevant for you. And so would ask that if you have a chance, just take a 1-minute survey. Just help us understand your preferences for topics for us to go into. And we also give you that opportunity to suggest additional topics. We give you a list, but also we want to know what you want to hear from us. So that just sort of brings me to looking ahead to September, while we kind of analyze what you send us and take that feedback to heart. What I want you to know about September, and this is important because it is a change in format for these meetings. We are going to shift them to special education leaders only so that we can delve into kind of singular topics more deeply. We are wanting to move away from this kind of potpourri style of meeting. I can only imagine, like even today, like we've gone over a lot of different information. We want to, instead of kind of going as kind of wide as we have in the past, go a little bit more in depth on certain topics. So for example, in September, we're going to hold 2 meetings, and we will send out the links for you in advance so that you have them as special ed leaders. But one of them will be solely a 101, an overview about IDEA, equitable services, and proportionate share. We feel like that's something where maybe, it's not relevant to everyone to have to come to an overview meeting, but so with these meetings, we kind of want you to decide, is this something that I need to attend to get this information? Are there other people on my team who I need to have go? We have a 1,000-person limit on these meetings. We're certainly glad to increase participation for these topics. So we're going to announce to you what the topic is aligned to the meeting. So we're still working out which, September 10th, September 24th, exactly which of these topics we're going to review at those meetings. We will record them, we will post them. And so we're going to record my presentation and make sure that that is up. And then we will stop the recording for the Q&A session. And so for anyone who can't participate live, We'll make sure that we do continue to post them. We think that's important, but we want to go a little deeper, a little more topical than we have these past months when we've really been dealing so much with the pandemic. I'm sure the pandemic, it's not gone, but we kind of want to get back to what we were doing before the pandemic, but just in only in a virtual model where we're talking directly with and working directly with special ed leaders around key topics. So again, for September, we'll do one on equitable services, that 101, that overview, make sure that you're ready and strong to move forward this new school year. And then we do have some new guidance documents coming out in September, particularly around your obligation to students who are in institutional settings, as well as guidance around timeout procedures, especially the use of timeout rooms. And so we are excited about going into those in more depth with you by having meetings that are just devoted to those topics and hopefully getting the right people in the room with us at those times. So that's what's coming for September. Nina, I'm glad to turn it over to you now to go into Q&A and see what's on people's minds.
Excellent. Thanks, Russell. So there are a bunch of questions. We've received a number of questions specific to masks, including are masks required on buses? What about students under the age of 5? What about music classes? And one of the links that was provided early on is the most recent guidance on the masks. So I just strongly recommend that people, if you read that, I think you're going to find all of the answers to those very specific questions.
Nina, if you don't mind, I'll just chime in on that a little bit.
Sure.
I agree with you. So the document that I'm showing right now is the one that you're referring to, right, Nina? The one we just released yesterday.
Yes.
And really important to note that masks are required on transportation. That's a federal order coming from the CDC. We also know, though, that the same sort of thing that happened last year, where there might be some students who simply can't. That's understandable, and we're going to work with those students. We're going to work with those families. They will still participate in transportation. They wouldn't be denied transportation because they can't wear a mask. That is really important. And also with regards to our younger students, it does just like Nina said, taking note that the document refers to students who are 5 and above. So that age, cap is described in this document as well. So, really appreciate that. I just wanted to just show that this is the document that people should look at to get those answers.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we have some questions, and I think maybe if you could just clarify the piece about if a student is out for medical reasons. So there's a question, does the sibling need a physician statement for requesting a remote? And then also, maybe if you could just review that piece again. I think there's a little bit of confusion from people from what they've heard previously. So just if the sibling has a medical condition, if a student has a medical condition, can their sibling stay at home? And who makes that decision? How is that decided? And is a physician's note required for the sibling?
Yeah, so I appreciate that. So again, this is the same, this slide hasn't changed since I think May or June. So the information has been consistent, although I understand that understanding it and applying it is definitely a challenge. And so there is no requirement for a doctor's note for a sibling. The requirement would be for the individual who has the medical condition. And we've given you the 2 forms to use. You can use either the one that is for students who might need home hospital tutoring, and then the other one for the student with a disability who might be out for more than 60 days. And so using whichever form is appropriate to the situation for the individual who does have the medical condition. The siblings, once you have that and you're in discussion with the families, we think you know the situations best. So we have not stated what a requirement would be. If there's concern, you could decide what steps to take. If there's agreement that the siblings need to also have access to remote or virtual learning, that it can be an option at the district's discretion. So I hope that's helpful. And it's not a requirement for the siblings. to have that, but it is an option if it's appropriate.
Excellent, thank you. And a lot of questions about if students test positive for COVID and or need to quarantine at home, are remote learning options appropriate at that time? And the second part of that is, are remote learning plans required?
Okay, so no remote learning plans. Let's just take that one right off the.
Thank you.
That's easy. Yeah, good. The documents that I showed you at the beginning, and this one links to this FAQ is a Word document. So I'm not going to share it with you right now, but this link, the August 20th FAQ update, talks about if you have a situation where a student can follow their schedule remotely, they can participate in learning from home if they're quarantining, and they can count as being present as long as they're doing it for at least half of the school day, which is the standard attendance requirement. So I'm going to say that is a change. I have been, you've maybe heard me in a webinar saying, because I was earlier in August when I said that there was no remote option. We've thought about that. We took that to heart. We took your feedback to heart, and we did make a change to say that you can access remote learning if you are in quarantine, if you can follow your schedule through, kind of a live streaming format. So, or some other, a virtual way of participating in school. So that, I'm glad you asked that question, Nina. That is clarified in the August 20th FAQ update, and I would just encourage people to take a look there.
Great. If Deb Hand is still here, if you could share the link for the MCAS Alt flyer, people are asking for that, that would be great. Let's see here. This one has to do with compensatory services. So if we already held team meetings and discussed compensatory services last year, is it expected that is discussed again this year?
Yeah, I hope not. It would only need to be discussed if, FAPE isn't being provided. If there's a reason, right, to hold the meeting. It is certainly not an expectation or requirement. I want students to receive their full educational services, their full IEP services, and particularly where we have said that there aren't physical distancing requirements. I hope that we can provide those services as they're written on the IEP. And so, last year, for example, we said that, if a school was in a remote model for 3 or more months, that we strongly recommended that students who were in a remote model for that extended period of time would likely need compensatory services meetings about last school year, right? So this new school year, we're starting the vast majority of students in person. So I'm really hoping that there is not the need for as many or really any compensatory services meetings during this year. But, I like the saying, people plan, God laughs. So saying this in August, let's hope that we keep strong with COVID, that we maintain in-person learning, and that I don't have to come back to you and change this message based on something that happens as a result of the virus. But this is my message right now. We're providing FAPE out of the gate.
And this one also has to do with compensatory services. So if a student is eligible for compensatory services and then they're out because of COVID or they're a close contact, I guess there are families who are asking for services to be made up now for any day the student is quarantined. How would you, address that if you were in that situation? What would your approach be?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And, there were some situations last year where students quarantined repeatedly and probably did miss a lot of services. And, I would, first of all, I would recommend consulting with your attorney about these situations, because I'm not, I'm speaking to you from a policy level and the facts are unique to each situation. But in general, it's that same concept about compensatory, about what was the impact of the loss on the student. And, did the student experience such a loss that there does need to be compensatory services in a situation where maybe there were repeated quarantines and services need to be made up. I'd also really take a minute to put in a plug for our test and stay method so that we reduce the number of quarantines that have to occur. So with test and stay, instead of quarantining students, we can do repeated testing using a rapid antigen test in our schools to keep kids in and not have to have them go home. Let's really try to cut down on the amount of quarantining that has to happen safely and effectively using test and stay so that we just don't run into this problem, because it really could be an issue where students have to repeatedly quarantine, and then there is a real, there is a genuine loss that has to be addressed. So let's hope we can avoid it.
Great. Okay, let's see here. This is about remote teletherapy for students who attend a private school, but who have a district-based IEP. So in some circumstances, parents are not wanting and they're preferring that remote services be provided so that the students don't have to leave their private school campus. I think you addressed that earlier, but can you just reinforce that message? So basically the students attending the private school and they're on an IEP getting services from the district, and the student would normally go to the public school to get the services, but the parents prefer that the student stay on campus.
Yeah, we're working on this right now. And so I'd actually rather just sort of come back to you on this question rather than answer it right now, because there's sort of a ripple effect to this that I just want to make sure that that we give you the most accurate information possible. So I'm going to take a rare pass on a question.
Absolutely, you're entitled to that. Some of the other questions are very specific. Some of them will be responding into the individual people who asked the questions. A lot of questions about staffing shortages, which we're well aware of and actively working on. I think those are, sorry, can IDEA proportionate share funds be used for 504 students?
No. So it has to be for eligible students who have IEPs.
Excellent. Let me just scan one more time, but again, I think some of these are very specific, so we are going to get back to the people who asked the questions. And then there are a couple, I think, that our team will discuss. And okay, somebody asked if we can show the specific language that was changed for the home hospital form. And so I'm just letting them know it's provided in question 4. That's the new bullet. And Russell talked about that earlier, and it will be shared on our website very soon.
And to be clear, we shared that the document that we shared with you in June had all the right information in it. And so, but thankfully, a special ed director recently reached out to me. I just happened to go check our website and realize that the version that's on our website it's missing one piece. We're getting that corrected, but the information that we shared in June is correct. We stand behind that. And I'm glad that Cynthia, that you brought that to my attention so that I could fix it.
Great. And then the last question I'm going to end with is, can you give an update on what is happening and what the state is doing about students who are beyond the age of 22 and missed learning opportunities, and what we're doing with other state agencies, just kind of how we're moving forward?
Yeah, so we do continue to work particularly with DDS and looking at sort of DDS has appreciated kind of a case-by-case approach to supporting that transition. And so just, I think a strong desire from them to get as many 688 referrals. That doesn't relate to the over 22 population, but there's a heavy emphasis on let's support our transition age students really well right now too. So like in addition to looking at those individual cases for students who are approaching or who have crossed over beyond 22, the DDS is working at that with districts or other agencies on a case-by-case basis. I just want to take this opportunity to remind you to please submit your 688 referrals for those students who are 2 years away from transition, so that the process can start as effectively as possible. The referrals do seem a little low, and so we think there's perhaps some catch up that needs to be done to make sure that the adult service agencies have the notifications they need to start that process.
Those are all the questions we're going to get to today. So thank you, Russell, as always.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for being here. Hope you have a great start to the new school year. Send us some pictures of those opening days. We want to see them. It just helps us stay centered on the students who we have the privilege to serve. It's always, frankly, a privilege to be with you. Have a great start to the new school year. We'll see you soon.